Welcome to another Founder Wisdom Pod with Shiv Gaglani. Shiv is co-founder and CEO at Osmosis, was acquired by Elsevier, part of NYSE RELX. That's the stock, people. He's now a medical student at Johns Hopkins with two S's. Very interesting guy because started medicine some time ago, decided to become a founder, found these huge companies, had exits, and now back to medicine, back to being a student. So we're gonna dive into this today and dive into Shiv's background, a high performer, Ironman like myself. So really stoked to be with the man today. This pod is brought to you by podpire.com. This is my podcasting company. If you want to start or scale a podcast, monetize a podcast, you can go to podpire.com if you want to do it the unconventional way. Shiv, welcome to the pod. Tell me a bit more about yourself and about what you're up to nowadays.
Yeah, Charles, thanks for having me. And first of all, I'll say I'm really impressed with everything I've seen come out of your work. The amount of activity you generate and where you are is amazing. So I'm looking forward to learning from you as well. Yeah, briefly, your summary, your intro was great. I started in med school a decade ago, encountered the problem that wound up then taking my next decade building and then ultimately selling Osmosis. And then after this exit was like, what do I want to do with my life? And what I wanted to do with my life was what I wanted to do with my life over a decade ago, which is go back and be a doctor. And so I decided to convince Elsevier, which bought our company, to let me go back and actually use the product I'd spent so many years building, Osmosis, to hopefully finish med school this time around. So as we're speaking, I'm in my surgery clerkship. So my day-to-day these days is literally scrubbing into the operating room at Johns Hopkins. And, just the other day I was holding someone's liver that was taken out because it was full of cancerous tumors, and very different than being a founder, but also really satisfying.
Very challenging as well. What are the other reasons? Because your parents, they had aspirations for you, and they were probably disappointed when they saw that you were you would become a founder. And there's one clear reason for that. My parents were also somewhat that way. My dad's an entrepreneur, but most of the time they just don't understand the why behind the decision. It's just that they haven't lived the life. But why did you decide to take that decision? Because it's an all-consuming one. Time, energy, it just fully consumes you. It's really an ambitious decision, and it's a lot of hard work. It's a lot of studying. It's quite a hard challenge, just like an Ironman, right? So why did you take that decision?
Yeah, exactly. Because of that, I could live a very comfortable life just post-exit founder, and I would think I was mostly pushing myself physically. The Ironmans, obviously, that we do, climb Kilimanjaro, and I realized I wasn't pushing myself mentally enough. And going back to med school, doing the harder thing of like, okay, now my days are studying, and I don't have time autonomy anymore. I'm literally start my day in the hospital at 5 a.m. and then leave once someone younger than me, an intern, a resident, or a fellow, tells me I can leave, which could be 3 p.m. It could be 7 p.m. And so, I think you're a fan of Stoicism too. Practice discomfort is a whole tenet of Stoicism and Seneca. And so this was a very uncomfortable thing to do. And I think because of that, I'm hopefully becoming stronger and better for it. But the real like driving force, I think there's this great quote. I think Viktor Frankl said that he who has a why can bear any what, right? You can bear anything if you have a why, a reason, a North Star. And my why is patience. I love interacting with patients. It's so interesting to meet such a diverse group of people, because being in the tech bubble, you can meet a lot of cool and interesting people, but generally they're all college educated. They're all making, 50 to 250K on, give or take. So all higher socioeconomic status. And, generally are, youngish, 20 to 40-year-old, maybe 50. And so I was getting a little too comfortable, like my slice of society was getting too narrow. Whereas patients at Hopkins, you can meet an 80-year-old who's had a long life as a carpenter, 50 years carpentry or whatever. One of my patients in my psychiatry clerkship literally slept on the subway. 24 years old, abandoned by his family, addicted to fentanyl. So I would never meet a person like that, and let alone be able to help them, if at a minimum as like a kind, pair of ears until I can get better trained to actually help them, medically. So I think that was the main North Star of it. And then a third reason is, I'm keeping track. I have a notepad where I'm keeping track of ideas, things I see that are frustrating, that are broken in the healthcare system that I'm encountering. And that's the fodder, as you know, because you're an entrepreneur, for future endeavors. Why do things have to be like this? So reframing frustration as an opportunity for building something new that could be helpful. Those are some of the core reasons.
Do you want to found another business off that? I've interviewed a lot of MDs and doctors lately that have practiced for 5 to 10 years and now are founding businesses because they think they can save 100 lives a day instead of 10.
Yeah, I love the scale. I mean, I think the scale is addictive as a founder, where you can go to bed and people are still using your products or listening to your podcast or whatever it may be. So I love that, but scale without direct impact wasn't as meaningful to me. Like having the direct experience of like, this is a problem I faced or patients I know have faced, I think is the real like, man, this is my driving force. So I wanted to balance both of those. And the other reason I'll share is that, Elsevier is a great company. They bought us 2 years ago. It was an awesome, awesome outcome, and have really enjoyed working with them over the last few years. Going back to med school is actually much easier now than it would have been a decade ago because I'm using Osmosis, I'm using the Elsevier products, and so things are much easier. Literally, my study days are basically me watching Osmosis videos and doing, 3D anatomy viewing on the Complete Anatomy app. So it's much more fun than it would have been had I gone back, 7 or 8 years ago.
A bunch of doctors that I talked to, it seems that they got used to saving lives and treating all kinds of patients. Why do you think they have that sort of fatigue? Is it just like me interviewing 15 folks a day and sort of getting interview fatigue and not getting as much interested in people because of energy reasons? Why do you think that would be the case, aka potential burnouts?
Yeah, it's a massive problem, and I'm glad you brought that up. Certainly the problem, I think, healthcare systems are having a lot of trouble staffing with nurses and doctors and then retaining those people. It's a very tough career. I'll say, like the surgeons I've met, it's incredibly impressive. They're like the Navy SEALs of healthcare. They first of all, you have to train for so many years, delay your income through your 20s and 30s, and then you have a ton of debt. The median debt of a graduating med student is $200,000 in the US. And so that's stressful, right? And having studied for so many years. So there's that. Then you want to start a family, but you want to have work-life balance. And so the nature of the job is just hard, right? That's one. People die in front of you, right? Like we've seen that. We opened somebody up last week who we wanted to save, but then when you start digging around, you see that the tumor has become locally invaded, and then you have to say, okay, we can't operate on that. That's so emotionally draining, right? We all have tough jobs and work, but like that is a really difficult thing. So I think that the nature of the job leads to, predisposes one to high stress, high debt, high burnout. But then also a lot of the things that we've forced physicians to do and nurses is a lot of documentation, a lot of the, stuff that they have to take home if they don't get to finish it in the clinic. They're seeing a bunch of patients. They have 7 minutes per patient on average if they're primary care. And then they have to document it all for billing purposes and legal reasons and all sorts of very, very little much to do with patient care, more of that. But that's where I think the AI innovations that I'm sure you're interviewing some of the CEOs of these companies that are doing this for healthcare, I think are so impressive and hopefully can help reverse this burnout issue, because we'll have, AI scribes that help take the documentation burden off of them. Certainly something we've covered here at Elsevier with the Clinician of the Future report that we released last year, about where I think, how should we be selecting and training and empowering clinicians for the next 10, 15 years of what healthcare looks like as opposed to the last 10 years.
So what's your routine to prevent depression or burnout or just putting too much on yourself? What habits have you adopted to sort of prevent that and walk on the edge?
Yeah, and I'd definitely like to hear your thoughts as well and learn from you because you do so much too. So I'll give you mine, but then would love to hear what you do and what you add to it. So, people often ask, like, how do you have time to work out so much, like do an Ironman, things like that, while you're trying to build a company um, or, um, or go back to med school? I my answer is like, how do you not, right? Like it's the stuff that keeps me sane, to be able to get the stress out of my system, to be in a flow state, when you're on a long bike ride. Um, and then one thing I do a lot of habit stacking, something James Clear in Atomic Habits talks about. I've called it seed habits, where you plant one habit and out of that root some other habits. And so for me, for example, very tangible example, I got a walking desk. I have to study 6 hours a day on weekends, right? To get through all this. There's so much content to learn. And so I'm watching Osmosis videos, and instead of sitting down on my butt, immobile for 6 hours watching these videos, I literally have this treadmill desk. I'm walking at 2 miles an hour. I'm getting 25,000 steps on those 6 hour days, 30,000 steps even. And just getting that non-exercise, like not really exercise, but non-exercise activity thermogenesis neat, which helps me burn some calories while also consuming uh, surgical educational content. And then I go to the gym later for like an actual strength training session, during which I'm listening to a podcast on surgery or just music to de-stress. So that's just one example of how this time around, when I started med school over a decade ago, I gained 15 pounds. I became depressed. I was like, this time around, I'm only going back to med school if I can put on my own oxygen mask first and keep myself healthy. And certainly I do a lot of socialization with friends and networking, and that really helps. But yeah, I would love to hear, Charles, what you do too to overcome the burnout.
It changed throughout the year. One thing that hasn't changed is my weekly call with my family every Sunday. I'm glad we do that and we stayed close knit. Throughout the day with this current routine right now, I just have to look around myself. It's mostly stuff that I bought. There was a time in which I was a minimalist. These days are somewhat gone, so I'll just use objects, that I had around me. So eucalyptus to keep me alive. I have this huge mouse pad in front of me, so sometimes when I feel tired, I just like spray it in front of me, and it smells very strong. So wakes me up. This 300-pound squeezer, which I can almost squeeze through, which is impressive. It's like grip strength with longevity. So that's fun. It's like a widget sort of. Then I have this pull-up bar. Hanging is fun, especially when lots of muscle in my back, so I need to hang these, go to the gym one day on two, do Apple Fit. Yeah, every day that I don't go to the gym, and I have my kettlebell on the roof. I have my normal weights. Apple Fit with weight lift is great. While I'm talking to you, I have this back massager and these compression boots, which are a huge hack. I had a compression boot guy on the pod this year, and he was like, "Yeah, you absolutely need to try these." And I'm like, "Okay, sure." Automation, right? I have robots working on me while I'm talking to you. What else do I have here? I have like a push-up bar that is adjustable. Push-ups are quite important. They work a bunch of muscles, so yeah, I would keep it to this. And one huge hack is like my roof, right? So I go up there every day with my doggies and have some sun exposure. I go run with them uphill every day in the mountain, 30 minutes of sun exposure. And yeah, just having views, is a huge hack. Just relax your brain. I don't need to meditate necessarily. I just look away and enjoy this beauty, and I get lost in my thoughts. And that to me is meditations. What do you think about that?
Oh man, so many good ideas. I'm definitely gonna take notes on the eucalyptus, the grip strength, which I hadn't seen and done. Um, and yeah, sun exposure definitely a big hack. Walking 5,000 steps in the first thing in the morning, if you can, gets the brain going. And one thing I want to clarify, I mean, I'm sure both you and I have convergently evolved to have all these habits that help us succeed. But I think people listening, if they haven't heard this, I know there's like a lot of like hustle culture and productivity culture, which sometimes I'm sure, self-admittedly I can fall into. I've written up articles on habits, but I want to be clear too that like these are the things that have helped me perform better now. It wasn't the things necessarily I was doing. I wasn't doing all these things out of the womb, right? So like, you add things to your routine, you leave things out of your routine. I think it's important for anyone listening to like not just discard and be like, wow, these guys just do 50 different hacks and like they aren't actually doing any work. which I want to be clear that people I know who do all these hacks come to it for different reasons, and sometimes they last for a quarter, sometimes they last for a week, but sometimes they, like ice exposure lasts for like years for me now, and has been a staple of my habit formation. And before anyone poo-poos any of these particular ideas, try it. I mean, be open-minded. I think open-mindedness and a genuine curiosity to learn is why you and I are on a podcast together right now, is we both like talking to other really interesting people.
Right. Sometimes it's hard. Well, in my case, hard to have empathy, or think in the shoes of others because I don't know. To me, it has become second nature and it's a very long journey. It's a very hard journey too. Like depending on what are your goals, and I feel I don't even have the time to look back. It's like, yeah, I'm just gonna give out all these hacks and I'm not even gonna think what people think of them. My philosophy is like maybe they'll adopt one out of 50, and just like I did back in the days, because I started quite low. I was a party boy, alcoholic, serotonin, hedonistic driven person back then. So what is your tip for empathy? I mean, you treated that fentanyl uh, addicted patient the other day. That guy's probably going through a lot, probably has these traumas. So how do you put yourself in the shoes of people that you're either treating, team members, or friends and family members even?
I have to thank my mom for, I think, just generally being higher empathetic. Like, she's a physical therapist. Her patients love her. My dad's a retired physician. He's also empathetic. My sister's a dentist. So I come from a family of caregivers, right? But my mom in particular, is the type of person who, growing up, and now, whenever we're walking on the beach or walking somewhere and she sees, old person or just really any person, she smiles at them all. And she also, an old person, she's like the first person to try helping them if they're stumbling or whatnot. And so I think I just grew up with that, and it became part of my DNA, literally. But then it's a muscle. You can train it. And, literally building a health education company, our vision was everyone who cares for someone will learn by osmosis, right? We're in the business of helping people care for other people. First step was mechanistically, like, okay, if somebody has diabetes, give them metformin, right? That's a mechanistic aspect of care. But the ultimate goal eventually, and we've been making steps towards that, is caring more deeply than just, okay, here's your, here's a drug or here's a exercise regimen. It's, are we genuinely curious about people? So like, even building this company culture, I released a workshop. Every new employee at my company went through this workshop called Building Relationships Through the Osmosis Values. And, kind of working, how do you build relationships that are authentic and where you're more of a giver than a taker, right? You're listening more genuinely. You're, seeing what you can do proactively to help somebody. And it just becomes a muscle. And then, you aren't doing it with an ulterior motive to get more sales. But like, if we hire people who are genuinely empathetic and helpful, they get more sales. It just happens. So I'm sure you've realized this too. You just add value to a lot of people. Hopefully it comes from a good place, and then you become faster and better at adding value. You build processes and systems to do that. So I think it's core to who I am, and I really love building upon it and asking people like you who do it at scale, how do you do it? Because we can learn from it. Humility is the other big piece of empathy, I think, is you have to not believe that you've got everything figured out, and just ask anybody. You can learn from anybody. What do they do? And obviously, I've taken some notes from you. I love the fact that you have that weekly family meeting. My family and I, we talk every day too, and I think it's such an important part of an increasingly lonely world to do that.
And where does testosterone come into medicine? Is there value of, I don't know, taking leaderships or taking risks sometimes in medicine?
Yeah, just risks in general in medicine, or what do you mean?
Yeah, testosterone is, high energy, sometimes risky, right? Way riskier than estrogen, which tends to be more calculated in your thinking, actions, decisions. So if you think of a surgeon, for example, would there be value in some of that testosterone in there, or it's mostly calculated decisions and not taking risks?
I think everything's on a spectrum, and I'm sure you can find people who are very good at certain jobs with at any end of the spectrum, right? You can find leaders who are incredibly charismatic, and you can find leaders who aren't charismatic at all, but they both could be incredible leaders, right? So I think it just sort of depends on the nature of the person and how they decide to achieve that goal. I'm not sure, like, I've just observed already in medicine that the vast majority of people are not the risk takers, right? Like, kind of medicine is such a long path that it does select for people who are more grinders, who like the prescribed path. And a lot of people I know actually get worried when there's ambiguity, right? Because for so many years, when you're 18 years old, going to college, then med school, then internship, residency, fellowship, it's pretty prescribed, right? There's several people ahead of you who are telling you what to do, what boxes to check. So when you're finally done, it's like, oh my God, what do I do now with my life? And so there's always these like midlife or quarter life crises that are happening. And medicine does not select for people who want to take risks. It's lives, it's patient lives. So finding that, but I don't believe that someone, these are self-limiting beliefs. Like I meet a lot of clinicians who say, I'm no entrepreneur. That's just not their identity, so they won't ever get started. But if they actually do decide to challenge that self-limiting belief and maybe do like an incubator or something, they wind up being incredible at it because they have the drive and the hustle that it requires.
Because sometimes on the operating board or operating room, let's call it that, if there's decisions to be made, sometimes tough decisions that goes against the textbook or what we said we would do in a patient, but let's say that I listen to my gut and I take a risk here, do you think that would be rewarded or not?
I think it depends totally on the context. One of the beauties of this experience is I've been able to meet the patients before they go obviously into surgery, and some of them, it's their body, it's their lives. So many of them will give before the surgery a long leash to the surgeon, say, look, do whatever you need to do at this point, right? Take that risk. And also it's Hopkins. And so Hopkins is a very well-established and well-regarded medical institution. And so tends to already get patients who it's their third, like they were said, no, this is too risky several times until they were able to get to Hopkins and meet the world-class surgeon able to do this procedure. So for example, I'm on the service where we have pancreatic cancer patients. Pancreatic cancer, which Steve Jobs died from, as you know, there's a surgery called the Whipple procedure that a couple of decades ago killed 30 to 40% of patients who went through that procedure died. It was basically more like a death wish. Dr. Cameron, who's a Hopkins surgeon, he's still here, he's in his 80s, and was operating until the 70s, perfected the procedure. And now it's less than 1% mortality rate. And so people who have pancreatic cancer want the best often will come to places like Hopkins. And so the risks, like they're already riskier surgeries than an average surgeon anywhere else would take. And so I'm sort of getting a bit of a kind of the heroes of medicine view, but I imagine that if I were practicing in like a local community hospital, it wouldn't be as risk-taking, high risk, high reward basically here.
How do you feel AI will integrate with you, human?
Oh my goodness, that's a huge question. I'll say, I'm already using it right now to streamline some of the scut work that you have to do as a med student or as a physician. Things like insurance, prior authorizations, some billing, some coding, and scribing, as mentioned. So kind of low value tasks that we already sort of, if you had the money, you could pay somebody $15 an hour to just follow you around and document whatever you're doing. So AI is doing that, is like it's recording patient conversations for retrieval, for literacy. So that's one. Obviously, there's a million AI personal assistant companies right now, and most of us are probably using ChatGPT or some form like that. But I think the personal assistants are going to get extremely good over the next 2 or 3 years and know us better than we know ourselves. Yuval Harari, who I'm sure you've read his books, has talked a lot about that, where it'll know our preferences better than we do and know our patterns better than we do, especially um, the more data we feed into those models to fine tune them. And so I'm excited for that local tuned AI personal assistant that knows me, that maybe if I'm getting stressed, it's because I'm hungry or haven't slept as much because it's integrated all that data. It knows what songs I want to listen to. It knows, if I'm feeling down, it'll notify my friend's AI that I'm feeling down. So my friend will be pinged by its AI to get in touch with me. Like that, those kind of things that bring people more closely together. But the worry obviously is that we wind up developing this intimacy with AI technology, which may or may not be bad in and of itself, but we all have virtual friends and girlfriends that don't actually exist in real life that supplant human connections, which I think is obviously the story of her with Joaquin Phoenix, but it's becoming real. What do you think?
Well, I think that I can picture you being the bridge between AI and the patient. The AI would be 99.999% of the time correct in its diagnosis. It's so good at reasoning, at memorizing, at speed. Now, the AI might have a problem with its eyes and its hands, right? So because you touch, you feel that there's also that special gut instinct in the human that is very, very hard to reproduce. That magic, right? That us high performers have. I also think that every human being has their magic zone. So I can picture you, like empathizing with the patients, providing the AI a couple more information, prompting the AI. I think that you'd be a great prompter, even as a doctor, and kind of being the hands of the AI in this real world. So what do you that vision?
I I think that's true to some extent. I do challenge the empathy part because there's already um, there's already some evidence that AI can be infinitely more empathetic than the average doctor or customer. Because doctors are stressed. Again, like we know humans are flawed in that there's that famous study of like judges in Israel where they tended to hand down harsher sentences at around 11 a.m. So people who had their before lunch sentencings tended to get, when the judges were presumably hypoglycemic and needed food, tended to get harder sentences. Same with, I mean, the same thing happens with any insert human profession. So doctors who are hypoglycemic or who are distracted or who just had a fight with their husband or wife, like of course they aren't all there. Whereas AI, perfectly patient, so if a patient is actually being aggressive in a telehealth conference or like conversation, getting mad, hey, you didn't explain this or whatever, a human reaction, even the most like Buddhist or Stoic person could potentially let out like a curt response. AI won't do that, right? It's trained to always be patient and understanding. So I think if anything, empathy from AI could be better, like minus like physical touch for now, but clearly like the humanoid robots are coming. I don't know. I think, maybe you heard that Sam Altman, Bill Gates interview recently. They sat down for a podcast and, they believe that once AGI is achieved, that humans may not have as much purpose, right? Because like, why would, even when Bill Gates was building Microsoft or Sam was building OpenAI, they made a lot of mistakes that an AGI probably would not have made as many mistakes or had as many issues. And so is there like, what do humans do in an age when like, like why does Magnus play chess when any AI right now can beat him at chess, right? Like why does he do it? For fun, because humans like to compete with other humans. I think it's beautiful. It's a beautiful game. Why would like, I feel like it would be malpractice in 5 or 10 years for a doctor to be making medical decisions without the aid of an AI that can expand the differential, that can incorporate all the latest articles, the millions of articles that are published, including obscure case reports from Japan that they will never see, that could potentially influence this patient's case, that'll look at every single base pair in their DNA if the patient uploads it. So I don't think AI will just totally take away what doctors do or nurses do, but I'm very bullish on it being an integral part of the equation to provide the best healthcare possible.
Yeah, because I guess my brain was basing the answer on like, hey, pie, for example, which sort of sucks at empathy, but it's still impressive, right? Why? Because it's instant and it's always there for me. So if I struggle psychologically at 1 a.m., I just open Hey Pie on my phone and I start chatting, but sort of annoying that it's always trying to make a fucking joke and puts emojis every single 2 sentences, you know? So, and then my brain was like, oh, is empathy hard? I have a hard time with empathy. And but I don't think empathy is fundamentally hard. You know, it's mostly about listening and trying to understand the other person's situation. So you must have lived these events. For example, if you want to understand pain, well, you must have gone through similar type of pain. And that's where I think AI would also have a hard time. Now with purpose, yeah, you're right. Instinct, I think we're wired as humans and stuff to get out of it. I think some interesting time will be when Neuralink will be a thing, you know? Sometimes I wish I would just disconnect myself from my human instincts, you know? Sometimes too much testosterone. Um, Sex drives for most humans is a struggle, right? Like a lot of people are addicted to porn nowadays. No one talks about it. You see fentanyl overdose, you see alcoholism, a lot of it since COVID, but there's these instincts that I feel that are taking us back. And I think that high performers also behave somewhat differently um, than most. I do think that will forever be trying to chase something. In my opinion, there will be two classes of human mostly, and I want your opinion on that. One which is pain seekers. I call them that way. I'm surely that way. You know, I chase Ironmans. I run up hills for 30 minutes on a daily basis under the scorching Mexican sun. Um, I've got to love pain, you know, and I grow 1% a day, quote unquote. That's my aim. That makes me happy. But I was also a serotonin fiend, you know, always chasing alcohol, women, fun. You know, I didn't want the night to end. It was 3 a.m. It's like, yo, why is everyone going to bed? You know, I want to continue that. Um, and I think most of humans are into that class. You know, if you give them the choice to chill their whole life and have fun and engage in hedonism, I think they choose that option. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's like the studies of the rats given cocaine that they'll just keep pushing the lever and taking as much cocaine as possible, not eating, not even having sex because the cocaine's more interesting, floods their brain. So I agree, and I think it's like humans are battling. Like some of the smartest people in the world have created, or the marketing executives at all these companies that want us to drink their vodka and to watch their porn and to whatever it is, and so we're fighting against that. And so those who exit the matrix tend to adopt these habits that are maybe hard in the short term, but long term are fulfilling, like the Iron Man, and derive personal pleasure from that. I don't know if it's like pain for the sake of pain versus like short term pain for long term gain versus short term gain for long term pain, like being addicted to fentanyl.
Yeah, certainly the gains. It's not like classic sadomasochism. The Ironmans. When's your next one, and what lessons did you derive from your? I call them mystical events in my case because they're so hard and filled with a cocktail of brain drugs that you don't normally get in real life. That they're mystical events for me. Like, what did you get out of these?
I love the community, man. Like I love meeting people, young, 20-year-olds to then my last one was Cascais in Portugal. I was like on the bus with a 75-year-old doing an Ironman and it was like, that's cool, like inspirational. I don't want to do it more than once every couple of years. So I've only done two. I'm probably going to do one in a couple of years from now because I just think it'll be hard on my knees long term until I'm confident medicine has better than knee surgery to offer me. Hopefully something medicinal. So I love the community. I love the process. Obviously, like the day or two after the Ironman, you feel a little sad because it's over. And so I want to get better at like not having that post peak or high drop, which is the case with drugs too and anything else that people pursue. So having that more equanimous view. But I love it, man. I'm glad, this is one reason I was excited about joining your podcast because you've done several.
There you go. And that feeling you get at the start line, right? You get all emotional because you know the work that has gone in. It's like mystical. And yeah, these, I mean, you're right on the knee pain. I got myself some Vibram barefoot, these are better for the knees. There's so many muscles in the foot, and we're like slashing 70% of them with Nike shoes, you know, or even Hoka and great brands like that. So that's a potential hack. In Mexico is always surprising too, because you also get not only people that are old, but you also get people that are fat, literally, and they're faster than you know. So it's always like, holy moly, man. If I'm carrying like almost zero body fat on me, and this guy right there, and he's like hella fast, you know, they have that mental resilience, just beautiful. And deep down, you also know that they've been through shit, you know? So yeah, I also think like one every couple of years, because it's also very demanding, but so worth it, you know. It's so worth the sacrifice and the insights that you get from these. In terms of mountain climbing, I need to ask you, I'm doing Everest in less than 5. Would you join me there?
Oh my goodness, that is incredible. I'd go to base camp for sure, but we should definitely talk more about that. I would love to hear more about it.
You'll need to split 3 weeks, which is, I don't know, man. In the as a doctor, 3 weeks, if not 4.
Next year,
Yeah,
in a couple of years, then yeah, I would have time in a couple of years. Yeah.
let's put that on the agenda. Where can people find out more about you till then?
Add me on LinkedIn. I'm always welcome at Shiv